Welcome to Policies and Priorities. I see we have quorum, and I call this meeting to order. First order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Ribbiak that the agenda for October 19th, 2015, regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adopted. Any changes or additions? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries.
You have to disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Oh, sorry. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Anyone have a?
No.
May that be noted? No? Moved by Councillor King that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend that Council approve the Celebrate Success individual and department policy. Yes, we're in the wrong order here.
It's not even on here.
These are October's.
My apologies, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
we had the wrong meeting.
We already lived that one.
The good news is it's not November yet. Yes.
First resolution before you is that the Policy and Priorities receive the issue summary report regarding the provincial accord with First Nations and Aboriginal consultation for information.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy, for that.
So we'll need a mover for that one.
Mover for that, Councillor Kirsty. Councillor King. Oh, Councillor Kirsty moved it. We don't need a
Good,
second.
we don't need a second.
Okay. Any questions or comments regarding that resolution? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. What's the smart score on this, Nancy? How's that?
It appears that there was a misprint of the resolutions, so we'll just go with the ones from the agenda.
Okay, right there. Second, and I need a mover for this. It's child care accommodation, family status policy. A recommendation that Policy and Priorities Committee receive this issue summary report regarding the adoption of a child care accommodation, family status policy, and that committee recommend the council approve the policy as submitted. A mover for this, please, Councillor Ribbiak. Questions or comments regarding the resolution? Councillor Papp.
I'll start, let Councillor Ribbiak, and then I'll see if we're on the same.
Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you. I appreciate the policy and the need of it and the processes in place to deal with the issue. But the issue is with regard solely, I guess, with the care of children. And my concern was, is there a similar extension of this policy to the care of parents and or other adults requiring care as well?
Mm-hmm.
So you would like to see something added to that, or?
I'm asking whether, well, I don't think that this policy as stated does cover those, so I guess I am asking whether consideration should be given to a recommendation regarding those. So a report about that would be
I
appreciated.
just want some input from our Human Resources Director,
by all
please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, under family status, the care of parents is included in that. It's all the parent-child relationships, be it parent to child or child to parent. So we would need to also have a policy regarding care of aging parents, any other child or situation that we're dealing with. So yes, right now we do have a need for a child care accommodation policy, so I specifically focused on this. But certainly in the future, we would have something a little more broader or a different policy altogether.
So Human Resources will be dealing with this at a future date?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Aging parents.
Yes.
But with adult children requiring care, same question. Does this cover that, or do we need a separate policy with regard to that?
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just want to do a little bit of research on that because again, I haven't read anything specifically about caring for adult children, so I'll just have to see where that would fall, whether it could fall under child care accommodation or whether we have a different policy.
Okay, and perhaps when all these do come forward, we can put them all into one policy. However, we'll do it piece by piece at a time. Does that work?
Yes, and again, just because we have a need right now for the child care accommodation specifically, I want to make sure that we got that on the table so that we can help our current employees who are in need of this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you. So the suggestion is that we provisionally support this policy because we have a need for it now, with the understanding that there will be amendments to it within due course and
This
relatively short
is
order.
what I heard from the director, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Counselor Pat?
Well, along the same lines, I would have preferred to have something that was all-inclusive, incorporating not only care of children, but also elderly parents, disabled individuals, and with respect to the disabled child, there is provisions within community living and that should be incorporated in that. So now, I want to be just clear, this is here because why?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have current team members who do have some questions regarding
Okay.
changing their work hours, their structure, in order to accommodate childcare. And I just want to make sure that we are handling the request for information and the information that we need from them in the same manner. You know, I want to make sure that we've got a form for them to fill out so that we can understand and get some conversation going. I want to make sure that we handle it consistently whenever somebody comes forward with any childcare requests.
Thank you, Madam Director. Perhaps the CAO can build on that?
Maybe you can help me with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to build on the director's comments, the immediate need for this type of policy specifically relates to employees who are going on or coming off of mat leave. Typically, mat leave benefits end at the 12-month period. However, a lot of childcare, daycare facilities will only take children at 15 months, so it leaves that gap. And the requests that we've received have been, how do we accommodate parents who may not be able to find that childcare to bridge the gap between the 12 and the 15 months, or a parent who may want to extend the mat leave past the 15 months, perhaps 18 months before returning to work. So those are the questions that we have been asked, and the director's developed a policy in order to deal with that immediately.
Counselor Pat?
Okay, that's what I'm getting at, is that what in effect we do not have is that actual policy that deals with this. Is that what I'm
Correct.
assuming, Mr. CA? So this would, in fact, by setting this in place, it would allow for those respective requests to come through, be processed, and be documented, and then approved. Now, just as a quick, I looked at here in it, and then, forgive me, I'm going back to my bureaucratic days. It talks about the management signature, so who would that be? Would that be at the director level? Is that who's going to sign off on this accommodation form?
Yes.
Okay, at the director level.
Yeah, I would definitely want the director to be able to approve.
Right, so it's not the manager, but forgive me, I don't mean to, it wouldn't be the manager that'd be signing off, because we have management, but obviously the director of that department would be signing off on this.
And the ultimate coordination will be done by you as human resources? Okay, so there is the hierarchy, and it's, there's an overseer. That's an important thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific.
And I normally don't do this, but if I can ask a small change, employee acknowledgement, it says I've read by the company. We're not a company.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, as soon as I read that, I thought, oops.
Yeah, I apologize.
No, it's not,
That
it just to be assessed by the corporation, the municipal corporation.
That
Just so we're clear.
wordsmithing can come forward when it does come
And
to
when it comes
council.
back. And then it's understood that, Mr. Chair, that those other aspects of dealing with those types of situations with elderly parents, disabled children, and that have been tested, and there are companies, I should, here I go, corporations that in fact have put into place that type of protocol to deal with that, because there have been challenges, I have to tell you, where groups or the corporations did not comply and were in fact challenged legally, and they lost. Okay, thank you. My questions are answered. Thank
Time
you.
is what prevents everything from happening all at once, so the other reports will be coming forward later. Mr. Mayor, you have something to say. Go
Thank
ahead.
you very much, Mr. Chair. Just wondering, so it seems like our current need is with infant childcare, and that is in the definition, but I don't see that the policy itself is only for infant childcare. Is that, this is for childcare, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, absolutely. It does- While we have an immediate need for parents of infants, we have also had parents of school-age children request accommodation in order to whether leave early or come in late in order to get their kids picked up and dropped off at school.
Right.
So that's another situation where, again, we would follow this policy to make sure we're asking the right questions in order to be able to accommodate them in a fair way.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm just building on the idea of an adult. it's not adult child, but an adult that requires care.
That's coming later.
Saying that this is not covered then, even though it's that type of relationship is a parent-child relationship, this policy does not cover it, or are we hearing from the director who's going to research and tell us whether it does or doesn't? She's
My
saying
understanding is that it's
definitively
coming
now.
forward, and perhaps the clarification of that, but this is one piece of the whole policy, and the others will be coming forward, then we could adopt them all into one as it comes forward, but this is specific.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, absolutely. Again, when I think about an adult child, there's some things that I definitely want to look into. For example, there are some legislative leaves of absence that parents can take in order to care for adult children with disabilities. So I want to make sure that I understand all of that legislation. And I know we have policies, certainly it's in our employee handbook that we support all of those legislative leaves. I want to understand from a Human Rights Commission, what's our obligation to support parents of adult children outside of those leaves? And that's where we're going to have to discuss, do we want to go above and beyond what the Human Rights Commission has set forth?
Okay, thank you. I guess my follow-up question that builds on all of that I would just ask the director to research this and get back to council. I don't want to hold this up, but there's nothing in here about age for a child that I can see.
You're right.
So that would mean that this could cover that or might cover that. So just Mr. Chair, if the director could just review that.
I think most policies are a work in progress. If we find that something is a little deficient, I'm sure we could fix it, right?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think the questions have been answered. We look forward to more information coming to us regarding concerns that were brought forward. And I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Next on our agenda is 5.3. I'll need a mover. A recommendation that the Policy and Priorities Committee receive the issue summary report regarding the adoption of a volunteer firefighter mandatory retirement policy, and that committee recommend to council to approve the policy as submitted. Questions or first of all, a mover? Councillor Pat? Any questions or comments? Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is about a mandatory retirement age for firemen, volunteer firemen at 65 years of age. So my questions go to understanding that 65 isn't really the new 35 as I really hoped it would be. So my first question is, how do we determine the physical capability of volunteers to fight fires at any age up to that age? One assumes that as volunteers from time to time slow down for any number of reasons. How do we know, or do we have a process for determining that retirement may have come earlier than 65, just out of sheer necessity?
I'll throw that one to the chief. That's a pretty tough question.
Other than the point when they're hired, they're not required to submit medicals or any ability. Over the years, it's been self-police where the firefighters come to the determination they're not capable of doing it anymore, they're getting too old or so forth, and they just retire or quit. As far as the stats go, where we come to these numbers is that it's been heavily studied throughout the province, and the mandatory retirement for full-time or professional firefighters is 60, and then basically we draw on the line at 65 because we still have a number of people that provide a good service between 60 and 65. Not necessarily the people, when they get into their late 50s and 60s, that we won't use them as interior firefighters, but there's an array of different jobs on the fire ground that they can perform, accountability and so forth. But the studies suggest that the frequency of cardiac events dramatically increases when they hit 60. And when they hit 65, it goes like at a right angle. So this is really to reduce or minimize our risk to the town and to the whole fire company or the whole department for us to provide a safe working environment. So someone that's 65 years old increases the risk to himself, and increases the risk to their fellow firefighters, and they increase the risk to the town.
So there is a lot of science behind this. It's not just picking a number out of a hat.
Absolutely, no, there's a lot of signs. The province, this has been a very tough issue across the province for a number of years now. It's been challenged a number of times, and no one has been successfully beat their argument on staying past those numbers.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Rebay?
Thank you. I have no argument at all with anybody staying past the numbers. My question, though, is with regard to having some assurance that the volunteers, virtually at any age, are in fact physically capable. I mean, you'd hate to find out in the middle of the job that someone has developed a condition or a problem of some kind that might have been debilitating. So I don't know quite how to phrase this. I mean, I understand moving the age to, or capping it at 65. I understand how professionals are capped legally at 60. Between 60 and 65, does it make sense, or at any age, does it make sense for us to be, I don't know what the test is some sort of medical or whatever, to assure ourselves to some greater degree that, in fact, whoever it is we've got, regardless of the age, is still capable of facing the rigors and dangers, hazards of a job like that. I'm just.
I think if health issues come in, that's a whole different story. What we're looking at is
That's what I'm talking
retirement.
about.
If in fact something does come and there is a change to the health or the ability of an individual, I'm sure that senior officers will be addressing that. And if I was in that position, I would say I'm having difficulty doing it. I would go to the chief or to the captain, but I'll ask the chief for a comment.
Well, through you, Chair, Mr. Chair, the one advantage we have as a volunteer fire service is that if you, the reason why we have great numbers, we look at a model across the province of like a 3-to-1. So if you want, you have to page 3 firefighters to get 1 type thing. So to get the numbers out, is that the volunteer, they're not held to do a particular job on the fire ground. If a guy shows up and he's not capable of doing something, or he doesn't want to do something, there's nothing that I have the ability to force him to do something. Yet if you are, to compare it on the full-time side of things, when you're a full-time firefighter, you go to the station, you're assigned to a truck, and you're assigned to that job, and you are bound to do that job within that shift. So if you're 60 years old and you're on the frontline pumper, which is common, you could be, you're required and you're obligated to do interior firefighting. But when in the volunteer side of things, when I have 10 guys show up at a fire scene and there's a couple guys in the back of the pump, if I assemble a crew, and like John said, the Councilor John, that the senior officer would say, you know what, I'm not going to put you and you into the building because you're 60 years old. I'm going to go, you guys are going to do accountability, you're going to do rehab, you're going to do an array of other different things, but you 4 young guys, you're the guys that are going in. So it's really policed by the officer on the fire ground and by the firefighters themselves. They admit that they can't go into a building when they're 60 or 62 or 63 years old, but they're not obligated to do those. There's a big difference between the full-time and the...
There certainly are a lot of duties going on other than putting water on a fire when you get to a fire scene. So it's a very diverse service.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you to the chief. Part of my concern, I guess, is not just the health of or the capability of the firemen to face the job, but to what extent might the town be liable if we are not certain of the physical condition of the people that we ask to do it. I'm sure this has been studied and that there's lots of assurance. I just want maybe some reflection of that degree of suspension of liability in these instances, or what is the liability?
Firefighting goes back a number of years. I'm sure that these situations are there, and I'm sure that there are answers. Chief, is there science behind that as well?
Correct, but I mean, it goes, I think, maybe the Human Resources Director can speak to this more, but across the whole corporation, whether you're digging a shovel or you're swinging a sledgehammer or you're climbing a ladder, it's all physical activity. And we really don't have anything in place that forces them to go to get a medical saying you're capable of climbing that ladder, you are capable of swinging a sledgehammer. Whether you work for Tice Road, you work for the arena, you work for the fire department. That's, there's nothing in place. It would, if we were to make mandatory medicals, not only would it cost us a fortune, you'd probably get a mass exodus of people from the fire department because they just won't do it.
Yeah, certainly don't want that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I take it from that answer that our volunteer firemen are covered by WSIB in the performance of their duties, and if that's the case, then I think that's plenty.
Yeah, and they're firefighters.
Firemen.
Don't call them firemen, they're firefighters.
My apologies, firefighters.
Any other
Thank
questions
you.
or comments? Councilor Papp?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the chief. So this policy would in effect, for volunteer crew, would basically state that the optimum time for you to retire is age 60, and we can extend it to 65. I guess there is general agreement, or is the associations feel comfortable, or has this been our practice? Is it here because we don't have anything in writing? Is that why it's?
Yes, through Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
It's, we just see, we've only, in my time I've been around the fire department, only seen one person really challenge it, come to the forefront
Right.
and say, you know, I don't really want to, and we, you know, through some good discussion, they said, okay, yeah, you're right, and it's time to go.
Right.
So, but other than that, most guys really, I've seen them go in their 50s, I've seen guys stick a little bit further past that, it's just how they feel, like, it's, my time comes, and it's really not it's not an argument, they don't really push it, they just, but I think by us putting the numbers as such in this policy, it minimizes our risk.
So what I'm hearing you say, we would have a formal documentation that for the firefighters, this is the actual protocol that we would follow, in the absence of not having anything. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right.
Is that correct?
That's,
Okay. So,
Director of Human Resources, go ahead.
Chair, if I may also just add, this was really seen as a necessity throughout all of Ontario because in northern regions and rural areas, the fire department is all made up of voluntary fire departments, as we know, and a large percentage of them are over the age of 60. So if they were to make Bill 181 also include voluntary firefighters, we would see a huge shortage in the province of Ontario. So they recognize that they did need to look at the volunteer force as different from the full-time force, thereby allowing the extension to age 65.
Thank you for that. I understand as well that along with the active volunteer firefighters, there is a club that is a social body that's with that, so the guy who doesn't want to go can stay around as a member of the social club. So, you know, this keeps the association in there, and I think a lot of people are there for the social activities as well, and this is taken care of there where we wouldn't have to worry about someone of that age actually fighting fires, but they could still be involved if they wish, right? Okay.
yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, that's what I was trying to say, to maintain the strength and the basis of our volunteer firefighters is essential. So by putting this into place, we also send a message clear to them that there are parameters upon which, and there's limitations, but at the same token, since we aren't, and we've been challenged over the years of becoming full-time firefighters, the fact is that the core group is what, 115 of them, or more than that?
in our, this part is 86.
86. Those are 86 individuals we want to keep here and also keep the recruitment going, so we build on that. So I'm fully in support of this, so that they're now clear. Just as a sidelight, through you, Mr. Chair, do we ask our employees, are the firefighters employees of the corporation? They are not, right? So, but our employees, are they required to undertake a physical every year?
No.
No. Interesting, okay. I'll leave it at that. So we'll, I'll support this, that's, brings up a whole other series of questions.
Yeah, and we're looking at 65 as a volunteer retirement age. We're not looking at the total human resources package tonight, so we
Okay,
could
well, I appreciate
stick on topic here.
Well, I'm, excuse me, Mr. Chair, but I was trying to determine whether certain protocols were being established for people throughout, and I wanted to know if they were employees. So I respect that.
Okay, other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Number 5.4, recommendation that Policy and Priorities Committee receive the issue summary report regarding the adoption of a personal relationship policy, and the committee recommend that council approve the policy as submitted. A mover?
I'll move it.
Councilor Ribbiak. Questions or comments? Councilor Pat?
I say this without prejudice. I would like to postpone indefinitely this policy.
Postpone indefinitely. Yes, we have a debate, no amendment, and it's a majority vote. So amendment to the motion to postpone indefinitely?
So you mean debate? We can debate it?
Yes, we can. But the motion is on the floor, so debate on postponing indefinitely. Councilor Ribbiak.
Perhaps.
First of all, perhaps we get a rationale from the mover of the amendment, and then we'll open that up. Okay?
Well, I want to keep this as short and brief to the point. I think this needs to be sent back to staff and revisited. I think there's just too many landmines in this whole area and discussion of this particular policy. And I've done some research, but I don't want to get into an elaborate side of it, but this is highly unusual. I'm not quite sure why it's here, unless there's something going on that we need to deal with, and if that's the case, then we need to deal with it as an identifiable person in camera. I would rather see the staff come back with something that is, or for that matter, I'm just was in my mind trying to understand why can't we deal with some of this stuff with the current codes of practice and standards that we have within our working staff relationships. This is all-
Perhaps I'll ask our Human Resources Director of Human Resources to address your questions, perhaps?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Respectfully, Councillor Platt, I would say it's because we don't really have any policies currently on record. Our code of conduct that we currently have on file deals specifically with how we conduct ourselves only during time of election. Our code of conduct doesn't go into any other form of how we maintain our personal conduct. I would respectfully, I disagree. I think the landmine becomes when we don't have a clear policy that explains to people that we do support social relationships, and we do support when relationships go from being social to being something serious, perhaps romantic, leading perhaps to marriage or who knows what. When we don't have a policy, people tend to hide things. They tend to, it can create buzz and stir that takes people away from the jobs that they're being paid to do. And in the event when relationships don't work out, it could lead to issues such as harassment in the workplace. And if we are the last people to find out, then our hands aren't tied, but certainly it puts us behind the 8 ball in helping to rectify the situation. So it's, I personally, and I wouldn't have put this policy forward if I didn't think it was necessary, I think it's important that we let staff know that we have a social committee. We encourage them to socialize and have fun, but we also just want to make sure that they understand when they are socializing, it's not a place to talk about work and they shouldn't be talking about work. And then should the relationship take the next step and move into something else, it's a time when we will need to know, because if we find ourselves in a position where it's a leader and a direct report entering this relationship, we might have to make some changes in order to make sure that there's no conflict of interest, perceived or otherwise. So from where I stand and from what I've seen in my experience, I think this really puts us in a position of avoiding landmines. But I will leave that certainly up to you.
Good explanation. Councilor Papp, anything following that explanation?
Sure, by all means. I respectfully disagree again, and I think that we should explore similar practices if that's the case of other municipalities. My experience, I'm not speaking for my colleagues, that most municipalities have dealt with this internally through staff. I'm just curious, particularly a couple of sections there. I think we're really walking into the whole area of documenting who does what and what to say. I really was very uncomfortable with that. And I don't want, I would rather, I'll listen to my other colleagues. I just found that whole compiling of information of what relationships, and I have been, quite frankly, misdirect. I have been in that situation, I've seen that in other venues. So if there's another way of dealing with this, and if there's another format and protocol, I'd be willing to look at it that way. So I'll leave it at that, that's why I'm asking for the postponement.
Okay, not to make an argument of this, but I'm going to let the Director of Human Resources have the last word on this on this particular issue, and then we'll open it up for other discussion.
No, I'm gonna have to just read what it said because I'm just not wholly clear on the section that you were just referring to, but I'll certainly review my policy and see where that piece about the documentation that you were uncomfortable with, I'll certainly review that.
Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we're talking, of course, about the motion or the amendment to postpone indefinitely, so I'm not going to talk about the substance, but just some questions around why we should defer it. It seems to me that we have policies, do we not? One is about nepotism, and I think there's another one about conflict of interest. And I'm just wondering whether, in fact, this subject isn't inherent within the subject matter of those policies, and therefore maybe what ought to happen is a review of those policies with an eye to the issues and situations that are contemplated within this one, whether that might get us further and therefore postpone this one and come back with maybe something under a different rubric.
Nepotism and what's here, I think, are two different things, but I'll ask the
Well-
Director of Human Resources for an opinion on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can absolutely go back and look if council is very unagreeable to this policy. I will absolutely go back and see what we can do to make it more agreeable. And if we're comfortable with what we have on record, then I will gladly step back and go with that.
So in fact, I'll ask the mover of the amendment, your idea is to send it back and have a new report come
I'm
completely?
agreeable, Mr. Chair, and I'm not into debating things. I just want to highlight that this is an area in which I think you can recalibrate this whole policy and bring it back and ask them to look at all the possible options, just in light of what, I agree with Councilor Ribbiak, there are other protocols in place that can address this.
Okay, and what we're supposed to be doing is debating only reasons why a motion should or should not be dealt with. It has effect on postponing discussion indefinitely. So should we postpone this or should we not? I'll ask the clerk to clarify what I just said.
I'll tell you what you meant.
Lost me already.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to be certain that members of committee are clear that a motion to postpone indefinitely essentially is the same as laying it on the table, which means it never comes back, as opposed to a motion to refer back to staff or to postpone to a certain time. I just want to make sure that committee members are clear on what was proposed by the councillor and what they're voting on.
Okay, so just to clarify.
Got it.
You would like to have it come back rather than to disappear in the clouds?
Personally, I'd like to see it disappear in the clouds.
Okay.
And that is a motion
Then that's the
to
motion.
postpone indefinitely.
Okay, Councilor Ribbiak?
Thank you. And I think what I might have been asking is that if there are any issues that aren't currently contemplated within policies that we already have, then maybe those policies ought to be reviewed, in which case I would be happy to table this one, but I'm not sure that there aren't issues that are out there that need to be addressed, and we just need to find a way of bringing them back. Anyway, that's.
Yeah, it's obvious that staff feels the necessity to
Yes.
bring something forward in this, or otherwise it wouldn't be here in front of us. But, okay, so we'll deal with postpone indefinitely, which means it goes away, and I'll get to you. And in fact, if that goes, then it goes away, and we'll have to look at another way to tackle this, perhaps through other policies. If it is defeated, then we can look at perhaps bringing it back in a revised form. Mr. Mayor, you have something to say. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, I was, when I first heard the motion and then Councillor Papp kept speaking about the idea of getting more information, et cetera, I was hopeful, but I'm not in favor of postponing indefinitely. But is this the perfect policy? I don't think so. Councillor Ribbiak has raised a number of questions. I have questions like, has our legal seen this? What is the best practice? All of those things. So to postpone indefinitely, I don't think it's proper. I think we should look at it and we should ask those questions. But postponing indefinitely means we're not gonna get the answers for Councillor Ribbiak, you know. And I want to make sure that are these issues covered by other policies, et cetera. So I'm not in favor, if that's the motion, of postponing indefinitely, but I am in favor, Mr. Chair, of referring it back to staff to answer the questions. Great questions like, does this meet, the other policies that we have? Can legal look at it? And a bunch of other ones that I can't get into because it's not germane to the motion. So I'm not in favor of postponing indefinitely, but I am in favor of getting those questions.
Okay, so I'll ask the clerk if, we vote on this, and if it's defeated, then we can look at something referring back to staff. If this is, so is there a way of, okay.
Amending this?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the motion on the floor as presented by Councillor Papp is to postpone indefinitely. If that motion is defeated, the main motion comes back,
Okay,
which is the motion to adopt the policies. Then it stands for any amendment that could be presented.
okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment, which is to postpone indefinitely, which means to send it to Mars. All those in favor?
Point of order, just,
Oh, sorry.
let's not, there's a reason why these motions are here. It's not to Mars, it's just,
It's gone.
it's gone. That's what the whole point is,
Okay.
Counselor, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so first, call the question again. It's postponed indefinitely means it's gone. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is defeated. Which brings the motion back. The recommendation that Policies and Priorities Committee receive the issue summary report regarding the adoption of a personal relationship policy, and the committee recommend the council approve the policy as submitted. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make a motion to refer this to staff to get a more complete report with the questions that Councilor Ribbiak asked, I'm about to ask, and others might ask. So it's my motion. So Councilor Ribbiak asked about the nepotism policy and the
Conflicts of interest.
conflict of interest policy that we have. The director spoke about the code of conduct. That should be in the report to us, and information on whether there's duplication or not duplication in the code of conduct. I'd like to know if this is a best practice, because a councillor said this is not done in other municipalities. I'd like to know whether it is or isn't. I'd also like to know if legal could take a look at it to see if it is, what the legal ramifications and all that stuff, if they could look at it as well. And I'm certainly, there may be
Okay,
other
our procedural
requirements.
notes here, it's,
I'm sorry, you could have
Yeah.
cut me off earlier, Mr. Chair, if I
so
was out of
what we're
order.
looking at is I'm looking at the notes here. Meeting procedures prefers postpone temporarily or to a certain time.
Actually,
We're looking at that?
Refer back to staff.
Okay.
It's the second motion on your quick reference.
Okay. Motion should include who it's referred to, reporting date, and any instructions. So,
Thank you,
in
Mr. Chair.
fact,
I'm presuming it's referred back to the director, and what I was hoping to provide was instructions on what we'd like to see
okay, and you
coming
did
back.
start on doing that, and I think the director has a good handle on what we're looking at. Okay, so that's good. And questions or comments on that referral?
Thank you. One of the things that I think can be looked at are the consequences with regard to the operation of the policy. For example, it's contemplated that somebody may have to move at some point. If they have to move, but we're a small corporation, if there's no place to move them to, does that mean that we're going to terminate people on the basis of that? And further, are we going to terminate people on the basis of they're not reporting relationships as required within this? I think that's part of the legal question, I suppose, but it's something that strikes me as being a natural consequence of the application of the policy as there is. We'd like to know where it goes.
I see our director taking copious notes on this issue, and I'm sure that all of these things will be addressed. Anything else that we would like to include in the direction? Nope. Okay, is everybody sorry, Councillor Papp?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, so I couldn't agree more. Comparative of other municipalities, legal review. I accomplished what I was trying to accomplish, was to get sure that we do it as comprehensive as we can, and that it's also acceptable, forgive me, that within the context of our senior management group and those on the front line, they understand what this means. So I'm in full agreement with the referral back, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is to refer to staff with all the directions that were given. Time?
I don't know how long it might take in turn to the CAO to see what the timing.
It depends on the time, Mr. Chairman, for legal to turn it around. I'm sure the director can handle it in a relatively short period of time. We'll make our best attempt to have something back to council before the end of the year.
As soon as you can get the information in, okay? Okay, that's all understood?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. And,
Madam Chair, this isn't normal, but I have a question that stems out of council, and it would be sort of, I guess, old business.
okay,
And it's just regarding the 30 days issue for Summerfest. It was supposed to be referred here to P&P. I did ask the question, and it's not here, so I'm just wondering when that's going to come to P&P for consideration.
30-day.
Sorry, the Summerfest 30-day moratorium on the other side of Summerfest.
Okay.
That issue was supposed to come here, and it's not here. And so if we can just hear,
Director of Recreation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are working on that report, and you will have it either on the 7th or the following.
Direction is given?
okay, thank you. Appreciate the
Okay.
update. Thanks. Thanks so much for the latitude, Mr. Chair.
Not a problem, okay. Moved by Councillor Kersey that this regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adjourned until the next regular committee of the whole scheduled for Monday, December 7th, 2015, unless sooner called by the mayor. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. I'm sure you've got the movers and all that. Nancy.